25-8.
No, I think it's official. I think summer has arrived. The National Party's support has suddenly become pivotal to the success of the rebranded Trans-Pacific Partnership. Labour's support partner, the Greens, will not be supporting the deal, and Labour will need to look for opposition support. Nationals leader Bill English is in the Wellington studio now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kim.
I'm assuming that you'll give that support, given that Todd McClay says it's the same thing that you had.
Yes, I think there might have been a couple of tweaks, but the Labour Party seem now to be quite a lot more supportive of it than they were, and certainly it's good for New Zealand to have a trade agreement across the Asia-Pacific region. It's been worked for 10 years. It'd be great to get it in place.
I get the impression that both you and Labour are spinning madly. I mean, you're saying that they've done a couple of tweaks and essentially it's what we did, and they're saying they've made some quite big changes and that's the only way they can accept it. Who should we believe?
Well, you should look at Professor Jane Kelsey's commentary on that. I think that'll sort it out.
Well, you haven't listened to Jane Kelsey with much attention in the past. Why start now?
Well, look, it's all part of the debate.
Suddenly you're agreeing with Jane Kelsey?
No, it's all part of the debate about the agreement. What we said a couple of weeks ago when the government was heading off to APEC, that they should do whatever it takes to get it over the line. Apparently some changes have been made. We'll see what those are. Couple of pages out of a few thousand pages. The good news is we can get an agreement. It will be good, particularly for the regions of New Zealand, and that's why we will support it. The coalition, of course, has some pretty fundamental differences over it.
Let's attend to some of the changes then. Previously, multinational corporations would not be restricted by the laws of the countries concerned, the investor-state dispute settlement clauses. Hence, there were fears of risking the environment, workers' rights, health and safety, so on. Do you think the changes made by the Prime Minister and David Parker have improved things?
If the changes get the agreement over the line, we'll be supporting the agreement.
But why weren't you worried about that before? Why didn't the investor-state dispute settlement clauses worry you?
Well, they were part of the negotiation over the last 12 months. I'm not in a position to comment on all the detail, but New Zealand took a positive role over the last 12 months with Japan to hold it together after the US left. The government has turned up there. They've negotiated some bits apparently. The good news is it's getting over the line. So we're not going to be arguing about the ins and outs of it. It's so important for New Zealand and for the Asia-Pacific region. So we just need now to make sure that that they persist with the process because it's not actually signed. And as and when it comes to the New Zealand Parliament, we'll support it.
I just wondered how much credibility either of you have when talking about the TPP too. Labour says, look, we've made it and we've improved it, and you're saying there's nothing changed. I'm not sure how people can know who's telling the truth.
Well, that'll come out in the wash.
Will it?
Yes, it will. And remember, this is about negotiation among 11 countries, all of whom had their own demands and expectations. If they found a path ahead, that is a good thing. We're not going to quibble over the details. I mean,
Canada clearly had its own problems, and Canada seems a fairly reasonable nation, don't you think?
Well, on trade, they're particularly difficult, particularly over their agricultural and dairy. But nevertheless, if they are going to come along and support it, that would be a good thing because it would mean the agreement is achieved and that'll be good for New Zealand.
Can I just ask you, we heard a little earlier about the plight of apartment owners in the capital having to fork out lots and lots of money to earthquake strengthen their apartments. I don't want to jump this on you, but you'll be across this because it was a problem before the election as well. Huge bills, they can't sell, they can't get replacement insurance, and they can't afford to comply with the earthquake strengthening laws. What should they do?
That'll be a matter of both legal and personal advice, and I wouldn't presume to know what they should do in a general sense. But do understand the nature of the problem. It's a really tight corner for people to be caught in.
Would you recommend that they, get interest-free loans, as Grant Robertson is suggesting, or a GST get removed from the work, or how can a way through, because they're stuck?
Well, there's people been affected by earthquakes significantly in the last 7 or 8 years. I mean, in Christchurch, all these issues have arisen again, and as part of the Kaikōura earthquake through to Wellington. Look, I wouldn't pretend to offer solutions in a generalised sense like that. There's particular and difficult circumstances. If the government wants to find some solution, well, that's up to them. We would support something that's going to be useful. But in the end, these are property owners responsible for their property.
But the issue in Wellington is that they haven't been damaged by an earthquake. It's the rules that insist on strengthening. Therefore, they've got to pay, in one case, $500,000 for an apartment that isn't damaged at all. It's the rules.
And I'm sure that would be a burden, if not a shock, to the people who are concerned with it. These are issues that can be dealt with the council, with Ministry of Business and Employment, who make the rules about this. And again, I wouldn't want to comment in a general way on what will be quite complex circumstances. I mean, what we've learnt from all this earthquake experience is that you need to deal with each case on its merits.
Kaikōura, does it seem a year ago to you?
It seems quite a lot longer ago, but it does show, I think, the intensity and success of the people on the ground. At the time, a year ago, it looked like it was a large-scale earthquake with a very large-scale problem, and that is the arterial routes into the South Island were no longer working. The people on the ground have done a fantastic job. When you saw the size of the slips, the disruption to that town, the fact they've made this much progress this quickly, I think is very impressive. And it was a large event. This was going to cost $2 to $3 billion. Another reason why you want the government's books in good order, so that when a big earthquake turns up, you can just write out the cheque, get on with the job, and get it done quickly.
Can I ask you on another issue? Do you think that Winston Peters negotiated with you in good faith after the election to form a government, given that he'd already filed papers against some of you, including you, allegedly leaking personal information?
You would need to ask Mr. Peters about that when he returns.
No, I'm asking
overseas.
you whether you believe that he negotiated with you in good faith.
Well, all I can say is we negotiated in good faith. We believed we were participating in a negotiation focused on forming a government.
And does it feel to you as if he wasn't negotiating in good faith with you, given that he'd already filed those papers?
Again, you have to ask him. I couldn't speak for him. We felt like
I'm not asking you to speak for him. I'm asking you what you think now.
Look, the negotiations are completed. A government has been formed. Mr. Peters is accountable for how he approached it. All I can do is account for how we approached it, which was positively with a view to forming a government, and we believe that was the kind of negotiation we were in.
Well, of course, he wants to know who leaked the information about a superannuation under the circumstances, given the politics. Do you believe that there was a public right to know if Mr. Peters had received far more than his entitlement in superannuation payments?
Well, I think there's a public right to know about the activities of politicians, including whether they've entered a political negotiation without necessarily telling people there was legal action hanging over it.
So there was a public right to know about Mr. Peters' overpayments in the superannuation?
Well, that's a matter that's now before the courts.
Well, I'm just repeating what I thought you just said to me.
No. The point I was making is that if the legal action was in place before the election, maybe there would have been a public interest in that. No,
but was there no legal action? If somebody gets paid too much in superannuation and they're in a position of high profile political individual, is there a public right to know about that?
Well, as I said, that's a matter before the courts, legal action to which I've been joined as a party, so I prefer not to comment on that right now.
Thank you. Bill English, leader of the National Party and the opposition. It's 7:45 on Morning Report.
Thanks, Kim. We're getting reports from listeners in Hawke's Bay of reception problems on 101.5 FM in Hawke's Bay. Our technical team are working on this as we speak, and they say in the meantime the best option is to tune in to 6:30 on the AM network. You can also access us online, of course. The internet, it's a new thing, but we think it will stick. We are joined in the studio now by Damien Light.